everyone, and welcome to the next episode of L'Exclusive, the podcast produced by PaperStreet Web Design and Marketing. As always, I'm your host, Nancy, the Client Success Manager here at PaperStreet, and today I'm joined by our Content Director, Allison. Allison, thanks for joining us today.
Of course. Hello, everyone.
The next episode in our series is going to be one about social media. We've already done kind of like an intro to social media podcast. So if you're still learning the basics and don't really have a system yet for social media, be sure to check that out either on YouTube or Spotify or some of the other podcast platforms. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to take a closer look at the individual posts that you can be making on social media. The goal of our show today is to really showcase for you what are the different kinds of social media posts attorneys can and should be making in their feeds. And to kick us off, I'll just get started talking a little bit about social media. It's important to realize that social media is a really great marketing tool for all law firms, and it's really great for your branding, for your thought leadership, and things like that. So it puts out there who you are. You can showcase your practice areas, you can talk about your attorneys, you can showcase your wins, all really important things. But it is an important caveat that we like to make is that branding exposure and things like that are truly your goals of social media. If your goal is to become viral, well, you're probably going to join a long list of thousands of other people who are trying to go viral or become influencers and things like that. Going viral is always possible. It's always a great hopeful wish that you keep your fingers crossed. But the chances of going viral, especially as a law firm, are a little bit more unrealistic. So we just want to set that caveat out there for you, number one. And then number two, just keep in mind that social media has different goals than something like pay-per-click or SEO. With those, you're going to see conversions. You're going to see leads coming in. You're going to see people being brought into your office more so. Social media, can you get some clients from it? Absolutely. Don't think of it as a fruitless effort. But that being said, its goal is more to be about your brand and your exposure.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. It's not necessarily a client generating machine, but it does a lot for helping define your voice, right? What's important to you, showing the faces at your firm. All of that has kind of a value that's a little harder to measure, but equally just as important when you're really trying to stress and value your brand.
And with that, we'll go into the posts that we see most often. Almost all of our law firms are going to be posting their wins and awards. But with that in mind, yes, it's great to do that, but let's talk about what those need to look like, why you should do it, what the parameters are, and things like that. Allison, take it away.
You're showcasing your rewards at your law firm is really one of the easiest posts you can make, right? On a regular basis, we see super lawyers, we see chambers, maybe it's Martindale Hubbell or an AV rating. It's a consistent kind of content base for you, which is great. But we want to make sure that one, it's not too law firm, and how awesome you are. Sometimes it's really good to put a spin on it. What does that matter for the client, right? It matters because X, Y, and Z reason. You can share a line about, right, how they picked the person. So it's showcasing that you are the top. Often they say, right, how many percent or top, 100 lawyers in Miami, that kind of thing. Those kind of numbers and proof can show that the benefit to the client is that you are working with, right, the cream of the crop, the best in the industry. We also want to make sure that we don't do it too often. So super lawyers is a great example. If you're like a mid or a large law firm, you likely have more than one attorney that's making the super lawyers list each year. And often making an individual post for all of those people, right? And now we're thinking like 10, 15 posts with faces. That's going to be too much. That's going to be too much in your face from the law firm perspective. We're going to want to kind of split that out. This is a great example for showcasing one attorney here. We have a really nicely done, kind of congrats post, has his face, has a little line about only 5% of attorneys in Georgia. This is another great example with a series of faces. So one post for everybody at the firm, right? And if you have too many people, you could always pull in the logos, for chambers or for super lawyers and kind of do it that way, link it back to a press release that has the full list of everybody's names. But both of these are great examples of custom images that showcase the attorneys at the firm, showcase the award, and a little blurb about why it actually matters to the person who's seeing the post on social.
What I think these are great examples of too is if you look at the imagery, you can clearly see, You see a congratulations, you see pictures, and you see the award or the acknowledgement that's there. It's really important so that someone could look at the picture. And then what's really great about this post to the side is it expands upon it. It talks about what you've done, it comments on it, things like that. So it's got value in both places. It's got the value of the image, and then somebody's actually going to want to read what's there on the side as well. Because don't try to just repeat yourself in the text as you do in the image. Have it explained. Like I said, in the Hudson one, it said that he's only part of the 5% or something like that in Georgia. It shows an award and then it elaborates on it. So it really forces a person to sit, to think about it, to look at it, and things like that. And what we also want to mention too is if you're a smaller firm, if you're more of a struggling attorney, starting out attorney, you may not constantly have wins and awards. So do little victories. Even if your firm opened its doors 6 months ago, that's still a win. Even if you've hired a new attorney when you never had one before, that's still a win. So even if you're intimidated from social media because you're like, uh-oh, I'm not constantly $20 million verdicts, or uh-oh, we haven't been in super lawyers yet, you can still find something to celebrate, something acknowledging what you've done, even if it's, hey, we had a busy week and we met with 15 clients this week. Just something to acknowledge your data and what makes you unique.
Yeah, those are great examples, Nancy. That's a really great point. It doesn't have to be something so concrete as making a super lawyer list. You can, kind of get creative and use what works for your firm.
Absolutely. So that we would say is what we see most of our attorneys doing. I think that a lot of the attorneys that we see when they have these posts rather, they can be tweaked, for consistency, talking, and things like that. But our attorneys are doing that. But I think the next category that we're going to talk about is the biggest missed opportunity that we see with our law firms and things like that. What you really need to do as an attorney is you really need to, and I use this term all the time. So I feel sorry for our clients that meet with me because I'm going to tell them the same thing over and over again. Engage and educate. So what does that mean? It means whatever you're posting, even if it's just on your website, but today's show is about social media. So whatever you post on social media should teach your clients something and be interesting and engaging in a way. So what that means is, you can have two varieties of posts. You can have just a standard educational post, like, hey, did you know the statute of limitations is 4 years in California to file for a slip and fall? I just made that up. But point is that's normal, that's neutral. It's just something that somebody can look at and say, oh, that's good to know. Slip and fall, 4 years, good. And maybe they'll read it, they'll give it a thumbs up, or they'll pass it along. Those are good and informative too, but don't be afraid to have a little bit of fun with it too. I mean, I know when I'm scrolling my LinkedIn, I've got tons of attorney friends and things like that. I love the interesting posts. Like, did you know it's against the technically sororities or houses are illegal in North Carolina? I was in a sorority in my college. So, it's like, oh wow, that's illegal. That's pretty cool to know. So what that does is it you provide that kind of educational insight and information that maybe someone doesn't care about the statute of limitations in a slip and fall, but they're going to have fun. They're going to be educated by your posts. And you're not doing anything wrong. You're still being an industry leader. You're still showing thought leadership. You're just having a little fun or a little spunk with it to make sure that somebody's going to want to follow you. So, okay, so let's say you have the information, you have the content. What should that look like? So, we've got a couple of ways that you can actually just share that kind of information on social media. So, when you're sharing that kind of post, for example, have it be very obvious what it is you're trying to tell the person. So, here, one of our clients, Malik and Malik, we did this post for them. Here's a myth. The myth is that personal injury lawyers are expensive. Here's the truth. It's, well, that's how you're going to maximize your financial recovery. If you don't have the best lawyer, you're not going to win. And then, so we talk about the myth, we talk about the truth, and then here again, the text is not just repeating what you wrote, the text is showing you something else about that. Even better, this post is connected to a blog or a page of the client's website so that person could click there and review this information further. So again, social media posts really are about a lot of moving factors. What is the fact you're going to teach? Do you convey that information clearly in your imagery? And then does the text of your post expand on that? And does it send them to your actual website? So here's another example that we need to know. Okay, you can't necessarily put a full definition on your website. The post might not look so good, things like that. But here we showcase an example of how you could do that. Workers' comp, definitely a topic that not many people know much about, but it's definitely something people want to know about. So here we say, hey, do you actually know what permanent terminal disability benefits are? Probably a person doesn't, so that they could look at the text. They could see what it means, what's included with those benefits. Here again, you can click on your website to learn more. So again, you can keep the facts just straightforward and unique and just informational that somebody's going to look at and find. And then you make sure that the post actually does the work for you. It's showing what it needs to show, sends you back to their site, and explains something. Because again, while you're probably not going to go viral as a lawyer, you're probably not going to get 5,000 shares of a fact. But if this is enough that someone paused and said, oh, I think my friend Tanya may be eligible for this, she can share that. The same thing with the myths and the lawyers. Oh, you know what? Someone so may actually want to reveal about why they should hire that lawyer or what the costs are going to be. Let them look at it. So your goal is to get somebody's attention, get them to follow your feed, and then share those posts as well. And really, truly, the educational and informative posts are going to be the biggest effort for that you can do as a firm, because that's what's going to catch people's attention the most. And that's what people want from you, no matter what your practice area. Are you a personal injury lawyer? Even if you're a mergers and acquisitions lawyer, put how a law is changing. Post something that somebody from a corporate law firm would see and catch their attention. There is so many ways that you could be educating your potential audience. And again, if you can't think of those posts, that's why you step in and talk to the agencies to do that. You guys can be in charge of your wins and awards, but let us be the ones to get creative for you.
You talked a lot about, the perfect package, right? How these have, the information, then they're tagged to the blog, they have a blurb, a description that's not an exact copy of what's in the text. And then also the image itself, right? They're beautiful little branding examples. They're very polished images. And even if when someone's scrolling through and reading that, maybe you don't get the initial interaction, right? No one shares it or necessarily likes it. But if they process that information and it enters their brain, if you will, right? When something comes up later and they say, oh yeah, I think I did see that PI lawyer. It was that red post. Let me go back. Let me see if I can find that, right? Like you've made that little micro impression, and that in and of itself is a win. That's something we can't track, right? Like we can't prove that that's happening. But later, when that comes back around, when the person has a need for recalling that information or for your business, that's the win that we're after. And one of the most common informative ways to share information that Nancy was talking about is news, which is our next example. So news and education kind of go hand in hand, right? As a lawyer, you are a very educated, productive member of society. You have a very specific set of skills and information, processing information that a lot of your community members may not share. And so when stuff is changing in your community or in your state or even at the national level, your voice and your ability to break down what the news is saying into a format that, your neighbor next door is going to understand is really valuable. And often breaking it down into what that means for the person. How is that going to impact the average person who's going to the grocery store and commuting to work every day and picking their kids up from daycare? And that kind of information is, I think, honestly, one of the most shareable bits of information that you can put up on your site when you're taking something a little more complex or even something trending, right? When something happens on the news and, for a few days, it's kind of like all consuming and it's on all the social feeds. If you can insert your voice into there with something that's really clear and concise, adding to that conversation, that's going to be really valuable. And that can be, that can be not, I don't want it to sound like it needs to be political, right? There's a way that you can share very basic information that has nothing to do with politics, not picking a side or not making any sort of commentary that's going to be polarizing, because that's something we're definitely going to want to avoid. But in this example here, this is a Southwest Florida law firm that just very, easily and concisely made commentary on the new, sales tax that was going to impact their real estate members. And often information like this, while this might not be breaking news, right, on your local Channel 7, at this law firm, they were getting questions about this from their clients. So it became aware to them that this was something that we maybe should make a comment on, because it's being, prompted in our various phone calls and weekly meetings. So that's another great way to kind of determine maybe what might be relevant content, based on, what's happening in the news.
Absolutely. And just really just remember that what we see a lot of times, what is a struggle with law firms, which is why they end up hiring an agency for social media, is you got to be timely. So a lot of times the lawyers are like, oh yeah, the law changed. Okay, we'll get to that like in a week or two and make that on social. You really can't do that. And again, it's not a marketing pitch to say, oh, you need an agency, but no, it's the truth. You have to be timely with all of this. You have to be able to comment on when the law changes and things like that. Because when you put off this, when you have that, oh, I'll get to it, oh, I'll get to it, oh, I'll get to it, you have a post about a law change a month later, it becomes old news. So maybe your clients have already seen that. They're like, oh, yeah, I remember reading that. And then they ignore your post. So if you know that you're not on top of these and you're not posting in a timely manner, it's going to be an issue. And the same thing is true by the efficacy of the timeliness. And I will not forget, there was a time a couple of years back, I believe it was, where a few very, very, very well known celebrities with mental illness had committed suicide. And it was Kate Spade, and I think a Top Chef, and then someone else. And the thing is that a lot of law firms jumped on that to talk about the legality behind it. Can a psychiatrist be held liable? Should someone have caught on that these people were suffering from mental illness and things like that? And those posts got a lot of interest. A lot of people were reading about that because they were interested. And
Right.
here again, you're showing thought leadership. You're connecting it to popular culture, which so many of our attorneys shy away from. But there's a way to do it. The news, pop culture news. Guess what? Even if you're not paying attention to it, people are reading about Kate Spade. People are reading about a messy celebrity divorce, this whole Blake Lively drama that's going on. Make use of it in a productive, respectable, thought leadership way. You don't have to comment about Blake Lively's dress, but you know what? Comment about, does this have merit? Can you pull people in? What is a subpoena? Why, Taylor Swift was subpoenaed. Oh no, what does that mean? Talk about, what does the subpoena mean? Things like that. And that's really making the best use of social media, because you're catching people's attention to things they want to pay attention to. But again, you gotta be trendy, you gotta be newsworthy, you gotta stay on top of it. So if you can't be the person that's reporting it the next day, or within at least that week, get an agency to do it for you, because when you get too slow, you're old news, and it's just not going to have that branding effect for you.
It's very true. We do it all the time. We get hot requests, right? Something, they send a link and they say, can we get something about this up? Yeah, sure. It's something we turn around same day. But if you take anything away from this podcast, give it a try. Take something that's more breaking news locally, or, even nationally at the state level, and try to comment on it. Try not to get wrapped up in the, oh no, like, you can do these things without having an opinion. It doesn't need to be polarizing. Your voice is, I think, a lot more valuable than most lawyers think it is on these kinds of topics. Definitely give it a try.
Absolutely. And you know what? We're talking about giving it a try. I think the next post type we're going to talk about is going to cause a lot of cringe. A lot of lawyers are going to be hesitant, say, oh, I can't do this. I can't do this. You got to. Okay. The next set of posts that you really need to focus on are the ones that humanize your law firm. Okay. They're the ones that showcase you being you and not necessarily winning a verdict or anything like that. It's really getting to know who you are as a person, because a lot of the lawyers, for example, if you're in what I call to our clients the people lawyers, if you're a personal injury lawyer, if you're a family lawyer, if you're a criminal lawyer, even if you're estate planning, people are going to want to know that they can trust you. Okay. So even though you may be the most knowledgeable person in the world, sometimes people get that fear factor. Doctors have the white coat syndrome. It's going to be a factor with you too. Oh, I don't know. Are they going to judge me if I want custody of my kid? Are they going to judge me because I may have partially been at fault in this arrest, or partially, I don't know if I was to blame in this car accident. So when there's a sense of who you are on social media, and social media is really the only platform you can really do this. So this is actually one of the strongest merits of social media, is take the time on social to be you in a way that's still going to be their lawyer. Okay. Guess what? People like pets. You want to show that your office has a dog? By all means, do that. People be like, oh, there's going to be a dog in the office. That'll make me feel so much better. If you're a big cyclist and you just won your cycling race, good, show that. People may say, oh, wow, that's cool. He has a hobby. He's not, sitting there judging briefs all day long. That's what matters. Take the time. Be bold, show who you are, show what goes on in your office, and, again, I realize that's taking a big leap. I realize that not everybody's going to feel bold enough to do that. So do the baby steps, okay? So take some baby steps, share things that go on in your office that everyone would take a life to look at. So, for example, one of our law firms, ones we just looked at, they had a legal aid charity event. So they participated in this great benefit, and they showed everybody. They showed everybody in their meeting after school. It showed people taking the mic as an MC. It just showed them out of the office. It showed them engaging in the community. It showed them smiling in relaxed clothes and things like that. So even though it's kind of tooting their own horn that they participated in an important pro bono event, but they just took a step to take a step back to show a more personable side of your firm.
Right. Right.
So that was one option. And then here, even better, the same thing. This was a 5K charity event. Here again, we saw a really great, noteworthy cause. But even beyond participating in the cause and bragging about that, here you are in sportswear, you're smiling in baseball caps. It kind of just makes who you are as an attorney more relaxed. It kind of just is like, oh, okay, I recognize that face. At least I can go in knowing I'm going to talk to this person and things like that. So, really, if you can even do one post a month like this, where it's kind of a snapshot of you, a snapshot of your office, just something that kind of just puts you as a human and not just this mysterious face that's going to take their call or take all their money or be responsible for their child's custody, anything like that. You really need to do that. And for the firms that are the mergers and acquisitions, the corporate lawyers, things like that, do this too, because maybe they'll be participating in a charity event and they'll look for you. This might be a great way to network. So announce if you're going to be in those events and things like that, because that way you're like, oh, you know what? We did need a lawyer to help with our, takeover or commercial real estate endeavor. Oh, maybe I'll go look for them at this event. So take that time. Again, yes, you are still promoting yourself, but it's in a way that's not as in your face as just wins and awards. And it's taking it back, take a step back. It's a little bit more humble. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with showing a little humility there on your social media feed. Another thing, Allison, you're a great leader for this. You help out a lot with this, is videos. Okay. A lot of our law firms are kind of trending into this video zone of having these videos made and things like that. And I talk to our firms like, oh, good. Did you share the video on social? No, crickets. Or how about you make some videos for social? And people kind of look at me like, oh, is that what I should do? Absolutely. Videos are fantastic because videos are part of the more elusive social media. Because sometimes our clients are like, oh, can I get on TikTok? Can I get on Instagram? How am I going to do that? Well, you're probably not going to have a beautiful beach background for your Instagram and TikTok. You're probably not going to have that. So what can you put on those channels? This is where you use those videos. Allison, why don't you help explain some of that for our audience?
Right. Nobody listening to this has never, right, sat on the couch and scrolled through a series of videos before. There's no doubt that they're valuable on social media. Our two favorite kinds are explainer videos and then what we call like shorts or reels, right? Those are the things that you're seeing most commonly on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, right? They're just like, less than a minute little videos. Explainer videos are they're more graphic driven, animated, if you will. They change from slide to slide and explain maybe an easy process or answer frequently asked questions. My favorite use of explainer videos at your firm is like the client touch points, like what to expect at my first meeting. I don't know, how do I log into the portal? How do I pay my bill online? Like those kinds of processes and procedures that you need to check. But if you're already invested in video and you're already making the effort to create them, why wouldn't you put it on social media, right? It takes some time, whether you're hiring an agency to do it or you're having somebody come in-house and take all of that footage, that B-roll, you're taking the time to make, your kind of firm overview video. Of course, it needs to be shared online. Like we've talked about earlier, right? The best way to do this is the full package, right? It's pulling in the YouTube link. We do always recommend YouTube for hosting. YouTube is part of Google. It's the better way to, it's the best of the platforms. It also connects with all of the PaperStreet websites are set up to pull in the YouTube feeds without adding to speed and making the website slow. So it's an overall benefit. But of course, this is going to pull in, right, your YouTube image. It links over. You can see, right, we have the bit link over to YouTube. It's going to say a little synopsis here. You could, if this was live, right, we could click and it would play. So if you're already making the effort to put your videos online, there's no reason why they shouldn't also make it to your social media feed. It goes back to, right, depending on what the narrative of the video is like, but the great thing you're getting here is audio and voice. And while the images change and they may be similar to some of the other posts we've shown, right, with the branding or maybe showing people's faces, this is also a chance for you to be able to like audibly share information with some users, which is often, really valuable.
Yeah, and two things that I'd like to share about that is, explainer videos are a lot of times with graphic bases, like what Allison said, and they look animated and things like that. And sometimes our firms are hesitant to put them on their websites because, like, oh, I don't know if it's brand, I don't know if it's professional or things like that. Okay, let's say that's how you feel. I don't think that's a yes or no about that. On social, that's going to be more eye-catching. Sometimes a good amount of people, more so than seeing a person in a suit speaking, they
Right.
actually may want to see friendly graphics or something that doesn't look intimidating. Or even if they're relaxing at home, if that graphic video approach may simply be more inviting on social feeds. So even if you don't want to put that particular one on your website because you're not sure if the animation is on brand, it's perfect for social media because it has more of the tone of what people are looking for. I mean, I would still argue that they're great for all websites, but again, I am the consultant. I talk to all our firms, so I understand when there's that panic about what's on brand, what's not. You can still keep something branded online and on your social that's animated and graphic based to kind of have that more relaxed tone for social media.
Yeah.
So that's
And you
one thing
create
I just wanted to mention. And then the other thing I wanted to mention too that Allison pointed out is we prefer YouTube because we can embed the videos and things like that. And obviously, it's great if your videos are also on YouTube in case somebody is in on YouTube and searching for something like that. But I do get asked by our clients what's the alternative. And we do tell our clients that if you really want to post videos and then share them, Vimeo is also an option, Vimeo. And the good thing about Vimeo is if you pay for a subscription to that, you can customize how the videos appear in like the snapshots and things like that. So
right.
Vimeo is the other option if YouTube turns you off for whatever the reason. Although again, we're big fans of using it on YouTube. Sorry, Allison, I didn't mean to chime in there.
No, you're fine. I want to touch briefly on what not to do because I think there's two big video no-nos that I'd like to share. We mentioned talking heads, right? It's okay to be a talking head for a few seconds, but we don't want a full minute of just a talking head, right? We need something to change. Pan over to some sort of B-roll or add some stock imagery into the video file you're making, right? Change it up a little bit, even a graphic. And the second is length. Anything that's going to go on social needs to be on the shorter side, right? Under a minute. We don't want videos that are, 4, 5, 6 minutes long and, previewing through your social media feeds. Really, that's a great example for, lots of website video features too. Anything that's being on the homepage or playing along your banner area, we want to keep on the shorter side. So keep that in mind. And if you're producing videos that are longer for another purpose, which is totally valid. It's often very easy to take that longer version and make a bunch of cuts of smaller versions that would be really appropriate reels for your Facebook page or your social media page.
Absolutely. And while we're on that house, and we'll talk about just a couple of what not to do's with social media, not just your videos, just kind of overall, because I think hopefully most of this is self-explanatory to you. But then again, you never know, especially if you are doing this. So again, the most obvious, you probably are thinking about this for your law firm, but don't do anything that violates your state bar guidelines. Okay. Again, if you're not allowed to call yourself an expert, don't. If you're not allowed to say, call us, don't, so just make sure that, a lot of times, like I said, we talk about this with PaperStreet a lot. PaperStreet's an agency that we work with lawyers all the time. So our writers or attorneys and things like that, we're aware of state bar guidelines. But if you hire somebody else to do your social media, make sure that if they're not exactly up to date on ethical guidelines and state bar rules, then make sure you have someone at your office who's doing that, because there is nothing worse than getting in trouble for social media because your person wasn't following the guidelines and things like that. Just make sure that somebody who knows the ethics and the rules and things like that is paying attention to it. Another possible no-brainer is, don't do anything on social media connected directly to your firm that's too inflammatory or too political. Because, sometimes even if you think that everyone in the world is going to agree with you, oh, this act of violence was horrible. I don't want anyone to, who supports this act of violence to contact my firm. It may rub someone the wrong way how you commented on that inflammatory event. So even if something is really hotbed topic, it's wild, you want to comment on, you want to say what social justice is and things like that. Don't forget that you may turn somebody off by how heated you got or what you said about a person. So there's always fine to have political disagreements. It's definitely okay to feel a certain way about what's going on in the world, but be careful with those posts because, again, tone matters, words matter. So even if you don't think what you're saying is going to harm you to other lawyers, to your potential clients, things like that, just take a minute, take a breath, pause, and say, is this too inflammatory? So, like, for example, immigration lawyers, I'm sure you've got a ton to say about what's going on in the world. Say what you need to say that's going to appeal to your clients, but just make sure you A, file ethical guidelines, and B, just do it in a way that's not going to aggravate your potential audience or peers because you said it too far. So just be careful of that. Try to have the appropriate filter. Okay, those are the two hopefully obvious what not to do's. But the other things we see here that our attorneys do all the time, a lot of times I hate to say it, but it's when you use these random social media agencies. Don't have a post for the sake of a post. I'll see these things all the time, like Happy National Coffee Day. It's fine, it's cute, it's great to have everything once in a while, but make it matter. So, like, have a picture of your team drinking coffee. So that way it's not just National Coffee Day, it's that you and your team are embracing that. Or, don't just say a holiday for no good reason. I mean, everybody's going to wish happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, happy Kwanzaa, all that. So that's fine. But are you doing something like Happy Flag Day? I mean, do people really care about Flag Day? It's something that you got to be careful that your posts just don't exist for the sake of existing. So personalize the posts, have fun with them. If it is dog day, everybody's got a dog or love cat they love or something like that. So show your dog. But make sure it's your dog and not just, a picture of Snoopy for the sake of a picture of Snoopy. Just try to make your posts relate to you in some way so that somebody didn't just go, well, that was pointless, and just keep moving it on in the post. And then last but not least, I see this all the time with our firms. Take a look at your feed. Are you 5 in a row of awards and wins? It's great if you're successful, and people want to know that you're successful. But if somebody, for example, is on LinkedIn and they go to look at your LinkedIn and they're going to see that your feed is nothing but talking about how wonderful you are, they're not going to follow you. They're probably not going to make it a point to check out your posts because it's kind of boring when you win all the time. And you may be wonderful, and that's great. But if you want to try to maintain an audience, if you want to try to get followers, your posts are going to have to be more than just how wonderful you are. Sprinkle in the education, sprinkle in the videos, sprinkle in the humanized content, because again, you have a really great post, like let's say that Malik myth versus truth one. People say, "Oh yeah, I want to see what other ones they have like that." If they go to your feed and it's nothing but just awards, and that myth versus truth is kind of one in a million, you're not
Mm.
going to connect with that audience on a greater level. So you got to just make sure that your posts are varied and not just a stream of how wonderful you are. Be proud of it. Be proud of your awards. Don't be offended by that. But just realize that social media's goals should not just be, let me tell you how wonderful I am nonstop, because then you're not going to really get the thought leadership exposure, the following connection, the connecting to the community, and things like that. All right. And then another thing that I think our attorneys need to be reminded about is using social media to actually connect. So that's going to involve some interaction with your posts. Allison,
Yeah.
would you like to jump in with that?
Yeah, the interaction with your posts is important. So if you're noticing that you're not getting any likes or comments or shares, one of the best ways to kind of kickstart that and like kind of create the momentum is to do it yourself, right? Your law firm has multiple people. You have multiple social media profiles likely. You could like your post, you could like, your law firm's post, you from your personal account, you can share it, you can comment on it. You can comment on it to say like, congrats, Allison, well deserved. Even something, right, as simple as that, reinforcing whatever the post title is gonna, kind of gives it like a little bit extra juice in the algorithm. And the other thing you have to consider is when you're commenting on something from your personal profile, there's a whole nother audience group there, right? That cares about what you're doing that is probably not related to legal at all, right? Friends, school members, like neighbors, right? Your kids' parents, like, or your kids' friends' parents, there's your family. They're going to be proud or want to share or be interested in looking at what it is that you're sharing just because it's coming from you personally and they have that relationship with you. So that's a great way to kind of expand your exposure a little bit and really kind of get the ball rolling. And I want to mention too, we work with a law firm who actually has worked into our deliverables for PaperStreet to send a team-wide email to their whole law firm when we post on LinkedIn, which is then supposed to trigger all of them to share, like, comment, that post to help it get, a lot of traction. And that's been something that's been really valuable. So they've just set the internal expectation at the firm that when you get this email, you need to act on it, do one of these things, like it, share it, or comment on it. And that's a great way, that's worked for them. We've seen, the increase there, and that is obviously creating all of these little mini branches that's going out right to hundreds more people than it would have been if it was just stagnant on their page. So definitely be sure, and there's a whole nother section of that, right, Nancy, is doing that on other people's profiles. So the whole point of social media is connection. So if you see something that's something you can comment on or like or share from another member of the community, another individual attorney, it doesn't necessarily need to be someone, that's in like direct competition, but being able to have that conversation and initiate that little touch point is extremely valuable. It's going to be part of the algorithm, right? It helps then he sees more of your stuff, you see more of their stuff. It becomes a more reciprocal relationship in that regard. So if you're making the effort to post on a regular basis, at the same time, you can surely scroll down the page a few things and like a few things and comment on a few things that are important or that matter or that you feel are appropriate. That's going to go a long way in kind of the big picture term of, increasing your own post engagement.
Allison said, it's also a great way to network, because like there are
Mhm.
other professionals in your community that they may appreciate. For example, if like your local doctor in your community posts a child, got over an illness or a disease or something like that. First of all, that's wonderful news for everyone to understand. So comment on that, say, way to go, team, happy to hear that, because it's just showing that you're aware of what's going on in the world, but also it may just have that appreciation factor. So another professional may be like, oh, it is really nice that they said that. Or, if it's like, let's say a local restaurant celebrating its 50th anniversary, you comment, way to go, guys. We eat lunch here every so often. The restaurant's going to appreciate that. So again, it's kind of like, what you do for one person, they may want to do back. So if you say something nice and appreciative and something to draw attention to someone's accomplishment, they may be more persuaded to do that
Right.
for you. So, I mean, don't, I mean, it sounds like it's malintent based, but it's not, celebrate other people's wins because they may do the same for you. And then you're getting
Right.
exposure in a happy way. You're not saying contact Smith and Smith Law Firm, in your post. You're just saying that's a great restaurant. We like it too. Or, congratulations to these children. We're so happy. It's things that make you have a little bit of personality. The community will appreciate that you care what's going on, and then someone else is more likely to return that favor as well. So again, what we need you to take from this is social media can work. It can really be effective for marketing, but it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Right.
The more interactive you are, the more engaged you are, the more creative you are, that's really what's going to bring you that branding, that thought leadership, that networking, and make sure that people follow you. So, before you don't have to hire PaperStreet. I say that in every podcast, and I mean that. But before you go and waste money on social media elsewhere or waste your own time with these posts, if your own office is doing it, just take heed to what we're saying in the sense that if you don't try to be creative, if you don't try to network, if you don't pay attention to what's going on around you, your social media is really not going to go anywhere. And that's why you'll have these law firms come to us and say, oh, I tried social media, it didn't work. How often were you posting? What were
Right.
you posting? And things like that. So, again, social media, will it bring you millions of dollars? Probably not. Will it bring you a lot of attention, thought leadership, and some potential clients? Absolutely. So if you're going to do it right. So that way that your return on investment does do what it's supposed to do rather than just exist for the sake of social media.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you, Allison. That was very helpful. I hope like that we were able to share some of our posts. Everyone, we hope you've listened. Like I said, you can listen to this on Spotify or other podcast platforms, or if you'd like to see the screenshots, check us out on YouTube. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your day.